and good afternoon, everyone that is watching Overdose and Chill Live. This is episode 104. My name's Raven. I'm the Partnerships and Brand Lead here at Overdose, and today my guest is Jeremy Meltzer from I=Change. We're broadcasting live today on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitter. So if you've got any questions, any burning ideas that you'd like to share with us, drop them in the comment section and we'll get to those as well. But Jeremy, welcome. Thank you so much for jumping on the podcast today.
My absolute pleasure. Great to be here.
Tell us a little bit about you. Tell us your background, what you're currently doing, what's going on in the world for you at the moment.
Just for a small question. Well, what's going on? I am working a lot, which is not that exciting, given that I'm sure everyone listening does precisely that. For us, it's been a 10-year journey to building a purpose-driven technology platform, bridging the retail and the NGO sector. And so I guess for me, work is more than work. It's there's a deep sense of passion and commitment, and working now with a wonderful small but growing team to really help change systems, which is what we're here to do. So it's I'm feel very privileged and to be able to do what I do. It started as a crazy idea 10 years ago, but we're making significant change in the world, both socially and now environmentally, of which I'm very, very proud.
Absolutely. Tell us about what I=Change is trying to do. How did this come to be, and what is it today?
Well, the brief background is I lived in Cuba, in Havana, when I was 21 for over 4 months, and I was in Cuba at a time when no one really went there. I didn't see another tourist for the whole period, and I lived in old Havana, and I had a Cuban girlfriend and really became part of the community. But what stood out very quickly for me was the amount of violence against women, which I saw in that community, and we were impacted by it directly, by actually my Cuban girlfriend's ex-partner, who sort of came after us one night. And I was just shocked. I thought, I knew I'd been fortunate in where I grew up in Melbourne and with a lovely family. But it was a profound and visceral experience of what so many women experience globally. And so it was a huge eye-opener for me, which led me to want to explore the issues and the complexity around the systems and ideas and beliefs and religions, institutions that hold women and girls back from realizing their full potential. And so I started meeting with NGO leaders in Australia and around the world who are working on this issue and have dedicated their lives to this issue. And I thought, here are these incredible impact leaders who are incredibly smart and sophisticated in their thinking and working on complex and often intractable problems. And a small amount of funding can go such a long way, to keep girls in school, to ensure they have enough sanitary napkins so they don't miss school, to ensure mother and children don't die during childbirth from relatively preventable complications, from ending violence particularly, from empowering men to understand the versions of masculinity under which they're laboring. And so I thought, if we could, there's this whole sector that needs more funding to accelerate their impact. I'm one person. How could I possibly make a meaningful dent in that universe? But how could we unlock the power of business and even e-commerce specifically, to become a solution for these issues? But when I imagined this, it was like, let it not be. It's not enough that it's sort of a nice to do, but what if we can make this very valuable for the businesses? What if we can actually prove the business case that in giving back from every sale, which is our model, which is what our brand partners do, it actually delivers for them a meaningful and measurable marketing return. And that hadn't really been done before, from what we understand anywhere. Like everyone saw a donation as a cost, right? It was just simply a cost to the business. And so we've remained very committed and politely harassed a lot of our lovely retail partners to say, look, can we get the data from you? Like, run these campaigns, but please share the data. Let's drill into the extent to which your customers, especially today, are responding when they know that you have a deep and committed purpose beyond product, and it has become a part of your brand DNA. It has become an ongoing and committed part of your marketing messaging. Let's see how your customers are responding. And the data we've got, and I'm happy to share this later on, is extraordinary. It surprised all of us, most of all the retailers, right? How much their customers are choosing them and becoming loyal and passionate ambassadors because they know that they are committed to building a better world. And so it's a really exciting time to be doing what we're doing. And especially as we emerge from COVID, my sense is we're all aware of how fragile this time is, and that we all need to be part of that solution.
How do you go about educating some of the retailers that are getting involved with I equals change? How do you educate them to educate their customers? With charitable efforts out in the ether, there can often be a misconception and a question mark as to whether it's legit. Where is this funding really going? People have ruined it for others in the past. So how do you go about that brand awareness and education that this is a movement, that the funds are going to the right place? How do you go about that?
It's a great question, and we hear this quite a lot. I mean, you're right. There have been examples where one NGO has done the wrong thing, and sadly, the whole industry sometimes gets tainted. We partner very carefully. We have a due diligence process where we vet and visit our NGO partners. Most of them are either ACFID or DFAT accredited, which are the most robust accreditations in Australia. And we have a methodology through which we partner with these NGOs based on a long-term commitment to development. There's some very basic principles around hiring locally, sourcing locally, unlocking local solutions. It's not us going in and telling Rwandan women how to rebuild their community. They know how to rebuild their community, right? They are of that community. And so we try to remove, a lot of the arrogance that's been inherent in the aid sector, even historically. The industry's come a long way towards understanding, we are simply in service to that community, and the NGOs that we partner with, as much as possible, they're deeply committed to those principles. And so, there's also this idea around overheads, right? That somehow the NGO should give 100% of those funds to the project, right? Like, everyone I'm speaking to, that we're speaking to today, is running a business and has running costs, right? There are staff costs. There's lights on in our buildings. It's the most basic thing, right? Yeah, and we measure the NGO partners through their impact, not their overhead, the quality of their impact, right? And actually, the irony is, and again, it's very, very simple once we understand it. Like, the more an NGO can sometimes what we might call market what they do, which is promote the good work they do, the more they can build their funding pie, right? Which means the more impact they can have, right? So the more funding they receive as a result of their marketing means they give more money away, which means they create more impact. Now, that is a good thing. That's what we're here for, right? So there's this very sort of almost, infantile often consumer response to this idea of, charities, how dare they, only give 85 cents in the dollar, right? I mean, how are good people meant to be paid, and how are they meant to report on their work, and how are they meant to improve the services and the projects that they're committed to? And so for us, it's much less about that. It's much more about the quality, the commitment, the sophistication, the people who are running the organisations, their deep commitment to community, and the length in which they've been working in that particular sector.
How much effort and energy do you feel you have to put into essentially justifying to the masses, telling them exactly what the percentage is that goes out to these charitable efforts? How much time and energy do you spend actually kind of reinforcing what you're doing?
To be honest, not much. I mean, the I Equals Change brand has increasingly a lot of recognition, and I'm often very excited and humbled by how much people know about what we're doing, and they understand that we have that due diligence process. And a lot of them are, very well-known organizations, like UN Women, UNHCR, Save the Children, Médecins Sans Frontières. And these people are absolutely bloody brilliant at what they do. I mean, absolute development experts. And so I think, the businesses we partner with understand that if they are going to give back, it's a big body of work for them to do that due diligence. And of course, we've also built the tech and the reporting mechanisms and the tools and features to make it actually deliver a return on that dollar, which is really exciting because this is emerging as a whole new marketing opportunity as well for retailers to stand out. So that's really where we focus our efforts on. And, we're having a really stable of NGO partners that are doing some of the best work globally, and building out our technology stack for the merchants so that they're giving through I Could Change or however they wish to give. If they give in any other way, it's still creating impact, fantastic. But we've built a whole plug and play solution to really make it simple and powerful and deliver a return.
Okay, to step things back a little bit, I obviously understand that you're an entrepreneur and an innovator, and there's plenty of stuff that you do out in the world. Why Cuba? At this point in time in your life, what was it that took you to Cuba?
Oh, it just sounded romantic,
Yeah.
No one had been there. No one I knew had been there, right?
And what sort of space were you in to obviously be affected by what you saw and then make action to change that?
So are you asking what caused me to be so impacted?
Were you in business at the time? Were you a uni student looking for purpose? Like, what was kind of your headspace where you were like, okay, I can actually make change?
I was doing my second year of Spanish as part of an arts degree. I had the idea of pursuing a music career. And I thought I better go and learn more Spanish because I wanted to sing Spanish love songs. I actually haven't said that really in public before, but that's okay. But it feels like a past life, and it was. But that was what I was passionate about. It was romantic. The music was beautiful, and I thought, let's go to Cuba and learn. Well, they're called boleros. They're the traditional Spanish love songs, which are beautiful. Extraordinary melodies. And I thought most of them are either written in Cuba or Mexico, and Cuba sounded more of an adventure. So I thought I'll go to Cuba. No one I know has been there, but it sounds wonderful, and let's see what happens. And I think we've all had that experience where you follow your gut and it changes your life. It's that one trip, that one person who says that one thing that can change everything. And indeed, I feel it's those moments that we all live for to some degrees, to remain and be aligned with a greater sense of our own personal story and purpose. We all want to work on businesses or in businesses or for businesses that do stand for something bigger than ourselves, that do stand for something more than making money, that are committed to actually contributing at this extraordinarily urgent time for humanity. Now, a few years ago that might have sounded like hubris, but it's not anymore. I mean, I believe in all of us. If we close our eyes long enough, there's a sort of a sense of a latent anxiety and an awareness that something's just not right. And we know that, right? I mean, we're seeing every few weeks there's something going on reminding us of the climate crisis, and of course we had the fires and floods in Australia, and COVID's the most extraordinary global event in the last 100 years. But again, a result of our incursions on nature, a result of the extent to which we are not our consciousness is not evolved enough to understand the true implications of what we do every day and the systems that we've created that are leading to degradation of the environment that sustains us all. And so it's not enough to keep our eyes shut. And, as they say, once your eyes have been opened, you can't unsee what you've seen. And I've seen things in the developing world. I just got back from the Burmese border where there's a proxy war going on that really no one knows about, right? The Burmese army are killing villagers and they're raping women and they're fleeing across the border into Thailand, where a clinic we support called the Maytao Clinic for $50 now, they can ensure a mother and child survive childbirth. And these are traumatized young people who the women are giving birth, and they have to go back to their villages where there is a risk of being attacked by the Burmese army. And, again, this is just one example of some of the shit that's going on in the world. And we feel so powerless to do anything about it. And I totally understand.
That's what I was going to ask is, at what point in time do you experience these moments where you're like, oh, this is so hard. It's, I'm not even making a dent in the grand scheme of things, because the amount that you've extensively traveled, you must just have seen so much war-torn, sad, developing countries where they're not getting the help that they need. They're not getting the support they need. So do you spend time going, oh my goodness, like, I can't help everyone? Is that overwhelming?
I think there's a few things there. I've spent a lot of time in the developing world, and ironically, often they're some of the happiest people. Even in the most desperate circumstances, there's often a sense of joy for one simple reason: there is a strong sense of community. And these are people who, we've always lived that way, where we lived in small communities and we rely on each other. And in the developing world, that's very much alive still. Less so in the big cities, of course, but in more rural areas, absolutely. And so it's often extraordinary, you sense how alive the human spirit is when you meet people who are living on the edge, where the risk of death is high. I was just at this clinic and looked in the eyes of this young man. He was probably 22, who had his leg blown off by a landmine. And he had this absolute look of shock of, my life has changed. And a big part of what he imagined for himself is over. And yet all his family were there. The whole village had come to be by his bed. It was the most extraordinary thing to witness. And I was just sort of quietly sat back in the shadows, and I didn't even want to take a picture, because I often, take a lot of photography when I'm on these trips, because I just felt it wasn't respectful. But that's an example of, yes, like we can't do everything, but we can do something. Yeah. I think it's fair to say everyone on this call is privileged, right? Relative to how most people live in the world, right? The fact that we have the time to be here, the fact that we even have a computer and internet, the fact that we're working on and in businesses, the fact that we're building something is absolutely a privileged position. And, what's interesting as well is that the NGO leaders I meet with, they're also some of the happiest people, because they're in service to something bigger than themselves. And so there's this interesting paradox where we think we're going to be it's this sort of elusive search for happiness based on this idea of when we one day have enough, we will be happy, which of course is nonsense, right? What seems to provide, from what I've experienced, the greatest joy on a daily basis is being of service to something bigger than yourself. And people who work in the NGO sector are of service to something bigger than themselves every day. And what's wonderful is that when we now engage all these, hundreds of retailers, which we have and growing every day, who, giving back, they're able to actually access in a very authentic way that core human emotion that now their business, which they're working on, they're building, or they're working for, is also contributing to building a better world. We were working with Pandora a few years ago, Pandora Jewelry, and we didn't expect this, but the leadership team came and said, you know what? Young millennial staff are coming to us and saying, we could work elsewhere, but we want to work for you because we see online that you give back from every sale. And today, in this time where there's such a war for talent, to be able to stand out as a business, as a retailer, and say, we are absolutely transparently giving back from every transaction. The way they're able to communicate their impact, galvanize and inspire and attract and retain great talent is, enormously valuable for the business, for the simple reason that they're able to tell a bigger story. And, we run this campaign, which I'm, happy to talk about, called Shop for Change. And it's around this simple idea: what do you care about? Because we all care about something. And if given a simple choice, we will, as we're seeing now in the data, choose a brand that is building a better world over one that is not.
Yeah. How do you navigate the likes of, just speaking of authenticity, How do you navigate the difference between authentic support and genuine contribution versus ticking a box virtue signaling? Like with merchants that come on board, those who are a part of Shop for Change, how do you just, because obviously I equals change is not there and was never made from a space of virtue signaling and I guess I'll do my bit in the world just today. So how do you work with merchants to distinguish the difference? Because I'm sure you want everyone to be as authentic as what you guys are.
So the way we work is that the brand gives back from every sale online. And we've got a very simple platform which pops up post-purchase, which becomes the customer's final experience. That most of our brands give $1. And you as the customer get to choose where it goes to one of 3 NGO projects. Then you can add $1 if you want, of your own money if you wish. Then you can track the impact to what we call a live giving page, which lives on our website, where you can see how much that merchant has raised in real time and where it's going. So the whole process is actually built on a principle of full transparency. Now, whether a brand is doing it because they think they're ticking a box or they're doing it because they deeply care, it actually matters less to me because the dollar's being raised.
Gotcha.
and the mechanism is transparent, regardless of the person's intention. So, I think it's important to be pragmatic as well. I mean, by building this as also a marketing initiative, where we've been very clear, our team, to speak the language of business. We're not here to say give back because it's a nice thing to do. Like, yes, of course it is.
Yeah.
But if you can give back and you can also receive a meaningful and what we're seeing now, a powerful marketing return. A number of our brands now are shifting their social media ad spend to their typical marketing ad sets around product and promotion, to featuring product and purpose, because they're seeing it drive up to 100% increase in conversions and 100% increase in ROAS, like nuts, much higher than any of us expected, reflective of how much consumers care. Then to be able to speak the language of digital marketing and have those conversations with CMOs, as we do now almost every day, and share these insights from, I guess, a thought leadership perspective. Our goal is, yes, to raise the much needed funds, but also to create system change and to shift business from what it's been to what it must become in order to create a sustainable future.
Looking at some of the countries that you've been to, I totally resonate with you and understand when you're saying that some of those third world countries, that underdeveloped countries, are some of the happiest people. I'm half Ghanaian, so when I went back to Ghana to go and see family, it blew me away how, we struggle hugely in Western world with the likes of mental health issues, depression and anxiety, and not feeling like we're ever enough. They feel so enough over in some of these countries. They're so content with what we would determine as having nothing. When you look at the likes of those countries, what I found inspiring was when they've found resources within the country, whether that's in a gold capacity or diamonds. And for them, it's really not as much of a big deal. They don't go crazy on it in the same way that the Western worlds do. When you were traveling, where did you find a sense of, I guess, up and coming, like a really promising country where you're like, these guys are not going to stay in the same space forever, But it's almost like New Zealand's put themselves on the map even more every single year, whether that's in an All Blacks capacity or a business, or a musician like Lord. So I see some of these other third world countries or developing countries. Have you ever been to any of them and thought this has got some serious promise?
Look, I think the African continent as a whole is it's just waiting to explode. I mean, it has one of the most youthful populations demographically in the world. Enormous talent and wisdom, and held back because of years of colonial kind of rape of that continent, and an aid sector that was well intended but has squandered sort of billions in development. That's now kind of moving towards, instead of giving, it's like empowering people to start their own businesses. I mean, I was in Rwanda a few years ago, and the most extraordinary country, because they're still rebuilding themselves after a genocide. right?
Yeah.
Where 10% of the population within 100 days had been slaughtered.
And that wasn't that long ago.
1994,
Yeah, it
1993,
wasn't that
1994.
long ago.
Absolutely, it was yesterday, right? And now Rwanda is the 7th fastest growing economy in the world, and the fastest growing economy in Africa. Why? And what's extraordinary about Rwanda is that women have rebuilt the country. There are more women in parliament. There are more women in the public and private sector than any other country in the world. And it is, for all the flaws of the current president, he understood that, men had screwed it up and butchered each other and created the tribalism, which, when I say men, mostly men, right? There were some women also culpable in the genocide. But what happens in times of war, men kill and women mostly hold the communities together and try to create a sense of normalcy amongst the disaster and the chaos. And so it's incredible to see how empowered women are in Rwanda, and the youth are, and this sense of, we support the Akila Institute for Girls, which is specifically training in Kigali, which is specifically training young women to be ready to work in the hospitality and private sector. And, these are women who come from, rural parts of Rwanda, and I've gone to have dinner in some of their homes. They slaughtered a goat because we were there, and I said, please don't save the goat, right? Save the goat for another moment. But they were determined that we were their guests, and they were, and for them, meat was a twice a year thing, right? So, very beautiful and humbling that they would, even though we said, please don't kill the goat, they killed the goat.
But that's a cultural difference, that was for them. That's like having royalty at their home, and they will only give you first class, Yeah,
no, it was really, really lovely, but they slept on the floor in one room, right? Extremely poor materially, but a sense of zest and community, and you're right, they see life through a different cosmology.
100%.
It's less about what you have, and it's more about who you have.
And who you are as a person, and the love that you bring to the table whenever you gather with others. And I think it's interesting how you were talking about it's like the roles that women and men have in life. It's the complete opposite. And I've always explained this to people, if you're ever going to visit an African country, if you're from the Western world, almost take everything that you've ever known and do the opposite. It's blows people's minds to, we in our side of the world, it's, we're talking all the time about, this is a male dominated industry. That's, the boys club, blah, blah, blah. Again, the opposite. It's the women who are so incredibly in charge over in Africa. They're the ones that hold the family together. And even when I was visiting, I thought it was hilarious seeing the men like, no, go and ask your mother. You know that I can't say yes or no on that. That's not up to me. I think that change in power in a way, and the difference in power sits around family and community and connection and love, as opposed to business and money and the fast-paced dog-eat-dog world.
When I lived in back to Cuba briefly, it blew my mind how poor people were. They lived on about $20 a month, right? Now, imagine living on $20 a month in a country that's not cheap like India. It's a relatively expensive country, 90 miles away from Florida. We're getting by on $20 a month and food rations, which consisted of mostly beans and rice. And yet at the same time, I'd never spent time with people who laughed more, more often, had more spontaneous parties, loved fiercer, and lived passionately. Now, that's not to say it was a deeply, there was still an enormous amount of tears, and I don't want to romanticize it in that they struggled day to day. But in terms of just human joy and the capacity to access it and express it, it really just changed my whole worldview around actually what matters, right? We all, it's the classic the classic sort of paradox of the story of, you know, the miserable multimillionaire who comes home to his big house, which just, and thinks, you know, he or she, you know, has built everything that they were conditioned to believe by simple fact that they grew up in a particular family and environment and culture and country, that this is what success equals. To one day realize, and sadly a lot of people don't realize this till late in life, that actually it's a bloody illusion, right? And it's an illusion predicated on a set of values that actually don't constitute human happiness.
Yeah.
So to be aware of it and to challenge it, and to challenge this sort of, you know, the celebration of enormous wealth as somehow something that we should all strive for and kill ourselves trying to achieve is so damaging. It's such a damaging narrative, and the illusion around fame, and how that somehow equates to happiness, which is so ridiculous when you start to pull it apart. And I imagine you as well have met famous people who are often bloody miserable because they hate the attention they get in the public. I mean, I think it would be horrible to be recognised everywhere, and actually realise that, again, all of this has been created by a particular, you know, media landscape environment in which we have grown up in. And, you know, I think this is a time when all of us who have the capacity to, it's time to challenge, redefine, and obviously business, right, which is an enormous driver of economic development, poverty alleviation. You know, how can we reimagine business to be a force for good?
Right.
And there's so much happening in this space, from becoming a B Corp to, you know, ESG compliance, to now, you know, we've emerged as a leader in terms of what we're doing, especially with e-commerce. You know, to find a mechanism as a business that is authentic to the change you want to create, and to become committed to it. You know, it's interesting, like we go home and we have our family and friends and the things we care about, and then we go to work putting this mask on and leaving most of ourselves at home, often our humanity, based on this idea that we're here just to make money for the business, and, you know, hopefully have a sense of purpose, you know, in terms of the work we're doing every day. But, you know, the businesses of now that are relevant and the businesses of the future will be those that are transparently committed to building a better world. And we're seeing that borne out in the data now, the extent to which consumers are powerfully choosing those businesses that are doing so. And so, you know, simply from an engagement and conversion perspective, right, which, you know, we all talk about online, we're seeing it drive, you know, extraordinary growth and deliver a really high return on investment, because, you know, brands give $1, but it's driving that average order value many times over, right? So often, you know, when we talk to brands, we show them a calculator and say, look, you know, based on your average order value and your average volume of transactions per month, you know, even for a medium-sized online retailer, this has to drive you 18 conversions a month to pay for itself, right? 18, right? Because you're getting your average order value, and yes, you're giving $1 from every sale, but it's only costing you that dollar in the donation. And then anything north of that becomes a driver of new revenue, right? So to be able to kind of really simply show how it's also driving growth, and you're able to meaningfully and powerfully differentiate to your customers and your stakeholders, you know, is kind of one of those, I guess, win-win opportunities for businesses to, you know, it's like this huge gap, right, between, as consumers, we want to buy from businesses that reflect our values, and yet most businesses are at a either don't really do anything in this space, or at a very early stage on this journey. And, you know, I often say it's really about the journey. Like even Patagonia talks about just minimizing harm in their production and creating sort of an end-to-end life cycle around their products, that sort of cradle to grave circular economy. So it's about having those authentic conversations, being on the journey, starting, And what we find is that's what consumers respond to. The fact that a brand can say, look, we haven't got everything right yet, but we're committed to being on the journey. And, you know, it's an honest, it's an authentic, it's often a vulnerable conversation that businesses can now have with their consumers and say, we want to take you on that journey, and we hope to get it as right as possible. It's going to take us time, but we're committed because we care, as do you, and we know the world is in a fragile place.
In terms of charitable efforts, obviously there are plenty of different organisations that people can donate with, work with, volunteer their time. Considering the state of the economy and what everyone's kind of starting to gear up to prepare for, how does that pose a challenge for you guys? Like, what sort of challenges does that put in play that you're going to have to tackle? Because obviously, you know, it's people's Netflix subscriptions that they're going, all right, now we're just going to pause that for a little bit, or, you know, their connections to pay-per-view and things like that. It's the everyday coffee being chopped down to once a week. You know, people are starting to tighten purses and buckle up for what could be coming. How does that affect you guys?
Well, actually, I mean, look, if we all buy less stuff, right, that's a good thing, right? I know it's not for you, you know, for a lot of us, they might, you know, but in the long term, it's a good thing, right? Because we all kind of, you know, most of what we buy, we don't need, right? We just want to have it, okay? So let's put that out there. That's perhaps not a bad thing, right? But people are going to keep shopping, right? So as long as we keep shopping, especially at a time when we're going to shop more discerningly and possibly less, at a time when we also know the world is in a quite critical place, then what we're seeing is that the brands that are able to meaningfully differentiate beyond product and talk about their purpose actually receive a greater share of wallet. So in terms of what we do, it's actually a really exciting time because brands are realizing they must do something, even though, yes, you're right, like there is a force in the opposite direction saying, oh, we can't give money away, you know, because of, you know, inflation, etc., and everyone's costs are higher, and I understand that pain. Yet, now that we've also proven that there is a marketing return, it becomes a really simple solution that enables brands to differentiate, it drives conversions such that it actually delivers that return on investment, and I think enables brands to have a conversation around, because we also help provide a lot of content from the NGOs to talk about the impact that they're having, to be able to report on it as well to their customers and stakeholders around the number of lives they've helped change. So all of that becomes, you know, I'd say increasingly valuable in a time when people are consciously shopping less or consciously shopping with brands that are actually, you know, reflecting their values.
No, definitely. We are broadcasting today live on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitter. So if anyone's got any questions, drop them into the comment section and we will get to those. I also wanted to have a little chat about you personally in terms of you're constantly giving back and you're in that mindset of looking after others before yourself. Who looks after you? Like, who's your support system?
Partner and friends, and I'm, you know, I think I've got some good habits. Like, you know, I just went for a run this morning, and
Nice.
you know, Dad took me running from a young age. I think I was 12 when he first took me jogging. So thanks to Dad, I kind of have a good habit of, you know, exercising, and that's a non-negotiable for me. I meditate every morning. That's something that I have done now for a few years. Try to eat well, and I mean, I do have this thing where I also don't know where to stop. Like,
Yeah.
you know, like I was working till 9 last night, and I think whatever. And it's not about the hours, you know, but I'm a bit a dog with a bone. Like I see, like there's so much for us to do, and I see us as kind of building the future, and I see the future as a pretty fragile proposition currently. And I'm absolutely, you know, I'm generally very positive, and I am, but I think it's also important to be realistic around what we have. I mean, if we all stopped emitting carbon tomorrow, there's still the next 30 years baked into the atmosphere, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're kind of in trouble. And my one concern about humanity is that we're very good at distracting ourselves.
100%, yeah.
With absolute crap, with nonsense, right? Like, you know, we distract ourselves with entertainment and gossip and social media, and we just titillate ourselves. And you know, we might just do that as we walk over the edge of the cliff. Now, it's not to say you shouldn't watch Netflix, right? And entertain yourself and have some downtime. Of course, it's not about that. It's about making more conscious choices and realizing that, you know, the privileged world is in a privileged position to be of service. And it's extraordinary what's happening. I mean, you know, some of the smartest people I feel honored to know have shifted their careers towards, you know, impact investing and ethical bonds, and looking at, you know, how do they shift capital towards renewable energies, and how do they, you know, organizations like, you know, the Nexus gathering, which is looking at, you know, galvanizing next generation philanthropy and family foundations towards solving some of the most critical issues. And business as a whole is understanding, you know, around ESG compliance and reporting. Is becoming, you know, from large listed businesses down to tiny startups, understanding now that this is imperative and is being expected of them by customers and all stakeholders. And so I'm positive, you know, whether we're going to get there fast enough, time will tell. But there's definitely a strong business case for doing it now and not waiting, because, you know, business as it stood, as it's existed, which is really been around, you know, economic principles of maximizing profit at any cost, and what they call externalizing the impacts, which is, you know, the impact on people and planet has been externalized downstream for the next generation. And it's catching up with us, right? Because we're that next generation, right? So we've got a lot of mopping up to do from the past. And yet what's exciting is that all of us care about something. And that's the premise of our Shop for Change campaign coming up. Yeah. So we run this on the UN International Day of Peace, coming up on September 21, and on International Women's Day. And that's a campaign where our retail partners increase their giving from $1 to $3 per sale for 3 days, no discount. And it's driving conversion rates over 40%, we've seen, with large brands like PE Nation.
I was about to say, if you can talk a little bit around some of those merchants that you're working with that utilize this I equals change and the Shop for Change campaigns really well. What are they doing that gives them that success?
Yeah, well, it's really interesting. So we had this idea called Double Down for Change, and it's simply all our brands give $1 from every sale. And we said, look, a big pain point for retailers is discounting, right? So we thought, you know, it's been a race to the bottom for a long time. It's very expensive, and it just creates kind of mass consumption at a discount, and it's not really good for anyone. So we thought, what if we could help our retail partners not discount, but instead double down for change, give an extra $1. So now they're giving $2 for a campaign period. And let's see how consumers respond. And then go out with, you know, what's arguably a more elevated message around their purpose, not their promotions. And what's again been extraordinary is how much consumers are responding, who are wanting to shop their values. So we're seeing with large brands like PE Nation and Manning Cartel, these are, you know, Australian brands, but many of you will have heard of them, and By Charlotte, you know, very busy jewellery brand, and many others. We're seeing it drive engagement and conversion rates over 40%. Mm-hmm. And because they get to keep basically their full margin, and it only costs them $2 or an extra $1 in this case, because they're generally giving $1, they're seeing a return on investment for that campaign of 3,000 to 4,000+%. right? So if you imagine it's driving, really high conversion rates, and they're keeping their full margin, and they're able to go out with a message around their commitment to change. Now that is so bloody exciting, because what this is emerging is a whole new way that retailers can build this into their annual marketing calendars around these double down for change campaigns, discount less across the calendar year. So keep their margins by discounting less, run campaigns around their impact, meet customers where they're at, which is around those messages of purpose. And we see now the exciting possibility for a wholesale shift from moving the industry from product and promotion to product and purpose. So as a result of that data, these campaigns are called Shop for Change. It's kind of like, I guess, an Afterpay day, but it's all around purpose. So there's no discount. Brands give $3 for 3 days. We provide assets. We've got these powerful videos where we've brought together some really well-known retail leaders and NGO leaders to talk about what they care about. And with a quite simple message, which is when you shop for change, your choice equals change. And a shout out to you guys at Overdose, because you guys have partnered with us for this campaign. So, deep and sincere thank you for coming on board and really being leaders in this space by believing in what we're doing and believing in the importance of engaging merchants on this journey, and in the opportunity to help them meet their marketing goals, but mostly to address some of the most critical social and environmental issues.
Absolutely. And I mean, for us in particular, it's one of those things where we can't always just think about ourselves, make it about someone else, think about the bigger picture. Don't be so fixated on your own situations 24/7, because there is a lot more going out in the world that you can help with in small ways. It is interesting, like you were saying, that in some of these underdeveloped countries, the amount of money that they're making, despite the state of their economy, is just phenomenal. What sort of efforts are you going towards in terms of funding some of these underdeveloped countries? Is it going towards, building schools? Are you just cash donations, or are you empowering them for, I don't know, maybe business mentorships or helping them to launch their businesses? Like, what sort of efforts have you guys got so far?
Just before COVID, I was in Bangladesh. I've been there twice, actually. Once I visited the Rohingya refugee camp, which is extraordinary. There's 1 million people living in a camp, which you can't really imagine until you see it. The second time I went, which was in 2019, was to visit the Hunger Project and the team on the ground in Dhaka. And what they do is they work to end the marriage of girls. And it's a really difficult thing to do. We have such an emotional response to that idea that girls being married at the age of 13, that's disgusting. But you've got to understand that in these communities that are materially poor, they don't see their daughters as assets. And so by marrying them off young, they can receive a dowry quicker. And so sadly, their daughters are often seen as a drain financially on the family. And also they're not educated in a way that they're going to also become a resource for the family. So what they do is they're all Bangladeshis who know the local community, and they're respected in the local community. And they're able to go deep into the countryside. And we went on a trip into these villages where we actually had a police escort. It was even not safe to do so. But they know people, and they go in and they talk to the village leaders. And it's men talking to men about how they should marry off their daughters. And so it's a really interesting example of how you can move the dial by engaging local leaders with local people. So it would have been useless, of course, for me to come in, with my bias and just being white and male, and it would have been completely useless and even dangerous for me to open my mouth. We were just sort of these observers. But to see how these older Bangladeshi, and one guy in particular who's the director, such an extraordinary, like he's 74 and he has the energy of a 44-year-old, and he bounces from village to village, talking to local leaders passionately about why they shouldn't marry their daughters.
Wow.
And what was interesting was there was a man who had the beard and the cloak, and through that Western lens of how we perceive someone dressed and looking that way. When this man opened up to talk, he teared up and he said, this was all done through translators, and he said, I was going to marry my daughter, and now what I understand, my eyes have been opened, and I realize that my daughter is a precious gift, and I'm going to make sure she finishes school.
Wow.
And it was such a powerful moment, because after months and even years of working in that community, had just been validated in that moment that this man, who was also a leader in his village, was now deeply committed to not marrying off his daughter, and wanted to make sure that other young girls in the village also had the chance to finish their education.
Wow. So it's almost an education piece that you guys are going out and facilitating and assisting with. Because I noticed you did say that earlier, where I'm not going in to fix the community. What would I know compared to those who are already in the community that just require that resource and support? So would you say it is more of an education and support system that you guys are operating?
Well, that's one of, we have over 40 NGO projects that we support. So that's one example. And that's a good one, because it's not like a silver bullet where it's like, $1. Like, for example, we work with the food project, the food bank in Australia, right? Who are helping Australians who are in need of food assistance.
Amazing.
Right? Where, there's almost 15 to 18% of Australian families now, at some point in the year, struggle to know where their next meal will come from, and that's shocking, as it should be to all of us. And I'm sure in New Zealand as well, there may just be a growing situation equally. But that's where it's easy to say, like, $1 in Australia equals 2 meals, right? Because it's clear, and they know the cost of food, and they know what it costs them to provide that meal. So we support projects like that as well in Australia, where it's very clear the amount we raise equals X amount of meals for families in need. The project in Bangladesh is an example of more of a long-term, cultural change, education. But it's never simple, right? Because, for example, now that the girls in that village will have the chance of an education, right? They're going to also become a financial resource for their community. And if you extrapolate this across the breadth of the country, then suddenly the whole country gets lifted out of poverty, because we know that when you educate a girl, it has a much larger impact on GDP than educating a boy. Not to say educating boys aren't important, of course they are, right? But what in the developing world especially, when young men are educated, they often spend 40 to 50% of what they earn on their families, and the rest on themselves. When you educate women, they grow up, and the businesses they start or the businesses they work for, the income they receive, they spend 90 to 95% of what they earn back on the children and the greater community. So what it does, and only 5 to 10% on themselves, right? So I don't know what it says about us, the boys, right? But it does show very, very clearly how women are far greater caregivers in respect to that investment gets returned back into the education of their children, into the health outcomes of their children, in a way that then creates that virtuous circle, where their daughter then gets a chance of an education and the opportunity to start a business, and then has that virtuous cycle ongoing throughout the community.
Amazing. So if there are merchants or retailers that are watching and they're ready for this, they're keen to jump on board, how quickly is this sort of process? What do they need to do?
Well, it's pretty simple. Just go to the Join the Movement page on our website, iequalchange.com. There is time to come on board in time for Shop for Change, which is the 21st of September. And as I said, we've got these fantastic videos and social assets to run that campaign really simply. So I'd suggest, come on board quickly, come on board for Shop for Change, see the results, see how your community, your customers are responding. And there's no time commitment. You can make a decision from there if you wish to keep going. But we've got all the tools to make it simple. The NGO partners are set up, the tech architecture is built, and then we provide all the reporting of impact. But I think, there's a small window of maybe a week if you wanted to come on board for Shop for Change. So we'd love to have you, and mostly, make sure that it works for you.
Fabulous.
Go from there.
Amazing. Just before we wrap things up, obviously there's going to be a lot of people out there who find you incredibly inspirational, and the journey that you've been on, it may be one that others are wanting to follow in your footsteps. Who for you is your inspiration? Who do you kind of look up to and think, yeah, that's a good human in the world. I'd like to kind of follow in that path as well as creating my own?
Raven, I look up to you. Seriously. No. Look at the amazing work you're doing, right? You are bringing together a platform of people to not just talk about business, but to talk about who they are and why they care. If you don't mind me saying that, I think what you do, this is the sort of thing businesses should do. They should have bigger conversations, right? I think this is an incredible platform, and thank you again for
thank you. It's an opportunity for us to hear about the human, and that's something that we know at Overdose is people first is so much more engaging and dynamic. Learning about someone's story, learning about the way that they operate and their personality and characteristics, strengths, weaknesses, all of that sort of thing. It builds rapport, it builds that trust, and the rest is kind of history from there,
Yeah.
So that's why we jumped straight on board, and we think that what you're doing at I=Change is fantastic. And if we can provide a space for you to raise that awareness, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being my guest today. I will drop a link into the comments of this video as well, so that people have got that direct thoroughfare through to your site so that they can get engaged. Again, thank you so much, Jeremy, and I'm really excited to see how the Shop for Change campaign goes this year.
Thank you for joining us on it, and thank you again for having me.